Hello, all. Welcome to another episode of the Tech Behind FinTech. Good morning. Well, good morning. It's good morning to some people. Good afternoon to others. Today we have a really exciting show. Let me just do the introductions. My name is Nnamdi Osuagwu. This is the Tech Behind FinTech. Today's topic: 7 steps into the cloud for your FinTech. Joining me today is Marcel Kouame, and let me do the introductions and then let's get into it. So I love this part when we read the impressive bio of my guest.
Oh, please don't read all of it.
Don't be modest. Don't be modest. It's all good. All right. Marcel Kouame is a solutions architect, a computer engineer who works with organizations to flesh out anomalies in enterprise systems by using audit strategies, risk frameworks, and ethical hacking techniques. Marcel has worked in IT infrastructure, risk, security, and governance for large organizations and multinational corporations since 2008. As an end-to-end software engineer, on-premise and hybrid systems implementer with compute, network, and security coverage as a solutions architect, Marcel's expertise has been leveraged for successful issue discovery, information security analysis, and risk-based assessment of complex enterprise technologies, infrastructures, and their related processes. Marcel's passion for emerging technologies such as cloud computing and distributed ledgers led her to written work on the security of blockchain and her certification of expertise as a Microsoft certified solutions expert in cloud platform and technology. A few of Marcel's clients and employers include the Bank of New York Mellon, Thomson's Reuters, FX, large gaming organizations, and pharmaceutical organizations. Marcel is an NYU alum. Welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us.
You really read it all.
I think bio should be read. You worked hard. I think people, we have resumes. I personally live for my bio. I think your bio is awesome, and I want it to be read. I want it to be said aloud. Let's celebrate it.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much, and obviously, thank you for having me here today. Obviously, we had like a really brief catch up yesterday.
Yep.
And really excited about the subject matter that we'll cover.
Excellent. So as always, as everyone knows with the show, before we start hopping into the subject matter, today's the cloud, we go into some articles that we found very interesting. So I want to start, obviously around FinTech and things of that nature, but I want to start with more of a feel-good story that I thought was like really, really good. So HSBC in the UK expands bank account service to help the homeless. So people without a fixed home address can now open bank accounts with HSBC in more than 100 branches across the UK. So according to Shelter, this is more than 253,000 people in England have been recorded as homeless and living in temporary accommodations during the pandemic. So right now, if they go into, how does it work? So if they go into a HSBC UK branch,
they don't have to submit docs.
You said what?
They don't have to submit docs. Like according to that article, which is kind of concerning. I have an audit background, and part of that is know your customer.
KYC.
Most of us, yes, KYC. I'm trying to keep it like as jargon free as possible. Most of us are familiar with HSBC's. It's a glaring thing not to be familiar with. That's why I'm bringing it up. I'm not trying to be the individual that talks about past transgressions, and if they've been able to rectify those issues, wonderful. But basically, this opens up a really big loophole for money laundering. It opens up a really big opportunity, if you will, for individuals with kind of shady income sources to come in and open up accounts claiming that they're homeless. That's a problem. Maybe it's a problem for me. I don't know if it's a problem for you or anyone else who kind of looks at it, obviously on the surface, but that's a little bit of a problem.
No, I mean it's a valid concern that you raise. I think in order to do it, I don't think you could just walk in without any ID. You have to be accompanied by a caseworker using the address of the charity supporting system. Obviously, there's always ways to hack the system or yeah, like you could have in looking at what you're saying, right? Like if a certain nefarious organization that wanted to launder their money, they could actually have mules set up and do something. So there's definitely ways, but in general, it sounds like right now 700 accounts under this no fixed address service has been set up. So it's interesting, and I think your security concerns are valid.
Yeah, but other than that, like, let's bring it back to the feel good moment that is supposed to be. It's a great opportunity for people who are undocumented. Thank you so much. People who are, going through hard times. COVID has really opened up that chasm. And maybe they don't have the means to, obviously have the appropriate shelter. And the article talked about, keeping your documents safe. Like, for us, that's not a concern, and we're fortunate enough, and I'm grateful that isn't a concern for me, where I have to worry about the safety of my identity documents. If I walk down the street and I can't identify myself correctly and validate, and they're not able to validate my identity, then what happens? So we don't think about, at least I don't think about that on a day-to-day basis, but I can see how that's a concern for other individuals, and how this is a great opportunity to get back to where or obviously make progress to eliminate that kind of homelessness and being able to find gainful employment and just kind of like get back on track. So that's definitely a great opportunity there. If other banks come together and do it as well, I think that'll be a really great move, because we're talking about the UK, the US, especially in like New York City, there's a really big problem with homelessness and stuff. So to be able to walk into like a Chase or even a community bank to open up an account so that you can get back on track, would be a really, really big move towards that.
Yeah, obviously, I have a security background also, so raising the KYC points and the audit totally valid. So I definitely like that you raised, and I think if it starts becoming a thing, then more safeguards can be put around to monitor those types of illicit transactions. So moving on to the next story, Stripe this week has landed a $600 million in funding, confirming a valuation of $95 billion and making it the most valuable private company in Silicon Valley ever produced. So found that interesting. It intends to use the fresh capital injection to invest in its European operations, particularly its Dublin headquarters, where it intends to create 1,000 new jobs. So just a quick background before we get into it. So a couple of things I want to mention. So Stripe already processes hundreds of billions of dollars per year for millions of businesses worldwide. They're now expanding to enterprises. To date, they acquired 50 enterprise customers, which process more than $1 billion in payments annually.
Yeah.
Their CFO says we're investing in the infrastructure that will power the internet commerce in 2030 and beyond. So that's really interesting. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, it speaks right to the heart of just kind of like, and I like that segue, right? Speaks to the heart of what we'll be discussing, which is tech and emerging technology and all of that fun stuff. And if they're creating new jobs, they're obviously contributing directly to livelihoods of individuals within Ireland in particular, and I think the owners or the founders of Stripe, I think they're part of like the PayPal mafia, right? Am I correct, or am I getting that? Because I could be getting my Silicon Valley founders wrong. If that's the case, that means that, and if someone's on and they know this information, whatever the case is, they're kind of giving that opportunity to other individuals who would be working for them. So, let's say someone wants to start a fintech and they start working out in Ireland, and they're able to get into the processing and the inner workings of a financial organization or a large financial organization at this point, privately owned, whatever the case is, they're able to also kind of create or just be the seed for the next generation of fintech organizations. So I think that's a great opportunity to just kind of create that legacy and continue the growth, and so that in the future we're not looking back like, man, why don't we have anything better than what we have now? I do believe in the power of the individual, and I think that's kind of like what I'm getting at here. They're contributing to the livelihoods of individuals, and more than likely those individuals will, maybe not all of them, but a large percentage of them will stay there, and a smaller percent will go on to be let's say top executives, and maybe out of that you'll get your next super fintech that we're talking about. Maybe 10 years from now, we'll be talking about another organization that came out of Stripe or out of some of the talent that they hired. That would be really exciting.
Yeah, I mean, you see that definitely a lot. Former employees of big tech, whether it's fintech or you're looking at like the Amazons of the world, the Googles, they spin off and launch amazing startups. So LinkedIn user, I had to look on my other device because if someone, depending on your privacy setting, it'll come up as LinkedIn user, not your name. But I think this is Medina Williams said, I saw that Ireland is the place to be. Yeah, I mean, it's very interesting. A lot of developments and things are starting there. I'd like to learn more about that. So
yeah.
I think that's it for the news side of it, and we can jump into our actual topic of the day, which is very, very interesting. So the topic of the day, 7 steps into the cloud for your fintech. So and I think, before we set it off, everybody talks about the cloud, and I just think I want to just mention the definition. I like the NIST definition of the cloud. They say cloud computing is a model for enabling ubiquitous, convenient, on-demand network access to a shared pool of configurable computing resources that can be rapidly provisioned and released with minimal management effort or a service provider interaction. Always thought that. I think I'm with the in the Cloud Security Alliance. They have that when they follow that. I mean, it's different definitions, but all around that whole same concept. So let's get into it. What are the 7 steps into the cloud? Where do we start, Marcel?
Well, we start with identifying what the cloud is. I like that definition, but I do think that it kind of leaves out the fact that the cloud has been around for a very long time, and it's this configurable resources with minimal, and using these words that kind of imply freedom and the ability to just spin something up. This has been available for like a really long time. Like most organizations have had, business units spin up their apps or whatever it is on top of their infrastructure. That's how it works. That's how technology works. It's just that with these cloud providers, they don't come in and nudge you and say, hey, you have a resource that's like killing all of our servers. We're going to kill this service right now, right? The way that they make their money is from allowing you to think that freedom kind of equals free to use. So just kind of going into a little bit more detail in terms of what the cloud is and the fact that it's been around for a really long time. It's like cloud has been around for a really long time, but there are now public cloud offerings that make it super easy to do things. So it's identifying what the cloud is and identifying, once you're able to do that, then you're able to just kind of formulate a strategy around, what you're going to do when you get there. I think that's super important. Yeah.
I think like just historically working in like the financial side for a while, there was always this hesitation for security to even move. Now it's becoming more commonplace. People like, all right, we have to either even if it's on a hybrid side from an enterprise level, right? There are benefits to going there where if you look at it like, I don't know, when 2021 now, so 10 years ago, 2011, 10, even 9, just the hesitation to even to think about that. Everything had to be on-prem. But even now, like even sometimes the migration shift is slow. Like they might move some development resources there, just so you can spin up service on the development side, but production must stay in the data centers. What we're seeing now, that move. What are your thoughts in terms of that migration from the enterprise side?
I think it's great. I think the move into the cloud allows enterprises to think about the future, and it takes us out of this antiquated state that we've been in for such a long time. Using old technology, using things that are really bulky and clunky, because it goes from we're running this in-house and we kind of don't have to think about it too much to we're putting it in the cloud. So now we have to think about cloud security. Now we have to think about data privacy. We have to think about protection. We have to, these things existed on, these risks existed on-prem and they continue to exist, but the focus is shifted in that direction when enterprises have to consider moving into the cloud because that cloud provider becomes a vendor. So the entire acquisition or the vendor acquisition process is initiated, and there are a lot of questions that are asked. So I think it's great that it's sparking those questions and allowing enterprises to kind of think future forward in terms of getting into the cloud and looking at different ways that they can be agile, different ways that they can take something that was monolithic, and turn it into something that they can break apart and put here, there, make it super fast, and do it hopefully in a more cost-effective, efficient way. So I think those are the more interesting conversations around moving resources from on-prem to a cloud provider.
Man, when they talk about like security, security is about your attack surface. So it just changes. So you kind of need to understand what are the tools that you're using there. Okay, how do I secure these tools versus on-prem? You can't, because some people go, is the cloud less secure? Is it more secure? It's still a security issue, but you just have to understand the attack surface you're working with, right? And then, and with some of the same rules apply, right? The least privilege, right? You're not gonna, you don't want to give too much privilege to any one person. You do not want to use your root account for everything. You want to think through your like you said, your data privacy. You want to think through even something as simple in the log, like how are you even securing your log files that may have certain pertinent information that
like who cared about log files before?
Or who cared about log files before?
I don't say it wasn't a thing, right? It was important to obviously logging is part of the security process. You have to, because it creates that non-repudiation. Like you log what the user does, and they can't come back and say that they didn't do it. They can't say that they didn't do it because it's in the log and it's there, and then you can gather the pieces of evidence so that you can, create a security trail if you ever have to come back and have that conversation. But who thought about log files before? That wasn't even a thing. It's what's the retention? And then you just put it on a, cold storage somewhere, and then you're just all right, I think a lot of organizations are moving from magnetic disks and just I think some of them document storage, from paper-based, the older ones they still have paper that they have to call Iron Mountain to come shred. So, all of those things become really interesting when you go into the cloud because you actually have to think about it.
Even thinking about someone manipulating your log files and changing it, right? So now you have to figure out things like how do you use some sort of hashing to say, okay, well, this log file hasn't been modified. But the same concept, it's not that it's less secure, more it's just new things you have to think about because your attack surface has changed. So you have to kind of get some level of understanding. But in looking back from it, and one of the things I'm going to
sorry, because I hate to interrupt people when they're in mid-sentence.
No, go for it.
It's the new things you have to think about is not really new things you have to think about. They've always been there. You just have to start thinking about it now. Not new. It's been there. These are things that have been there. You just have to think about them now. You maybe have to think about them differently, but they're not new.
Okay, I could.
So enterprises going in, you know, and it's like that. Even that concept to me, it's like don't try to reinvent the wheel. This is not new. Think about it differently. Think outside the box, but don't think of it as something new, because new becomes scary, becomes this, becomes that. And just think about a problem that you already know, or a risk that you may already understand differently, then you're able to attack that.
Well, is it that enough we can rephrase it and say prioritize different, right? Because now, obviously, 100% of securities is not a realistic goal here, right? Like there's no such thing. So you have
scary to you.
Yeah, so it's about like prioritization. Let's say info, bro. Let's say, what does he say? You have a comment. Correct. There's actually not many new things. You know? nothing. So no, but okay, yeah, but that's great to the point. But now maybe the better way to say it from my side is you're prioritizing differently, right?
New priorities.
New priorities. Okay, I like that. No, so let's think about it. Let's also go into the question where we're saying you have now different cloud vendors, right? And you know, what are some of the steps to take to say which one are you going to choose, depending on, obviously it depends on what you're launching, your functionality, but what are some of your thoughts around that?
Yeah, so when I think about cloud vendors or cloud providers, whatever you want to call them, you know, a cloud provider is providing at the very basic level resources for you. And depending on how you want to interact with those resources, that's how you'll interact with the cloud provider. That will define your migration into the cloud, or if you're cloud first, it'll define how you just kind of stand up your applications in the cloud, right? So the first step is obviously identifying how you are going to go into the cloud. Like, going into the cloud is not just getting up and saying, okay, I'm going to go into the cloud. And a lot of times you have these, free trial-based periods, so you can just kind of play around in there. And even before you create a trial, you should have some type of objective, depending on how large your organization is. I mean, if you're a student and you're just going in there to hack around and put up some labs, that's completely different. But if you are a fintech, and if you're just a one-person fintech even, you should sit down and think about how you're going to interact with that cloud provider. So is it going to be infrastructure as a service? Will it be, platform as a service? Will it be software as a service? Which, I mean, like, really, I don't think many people are going in at that level. But definitely understanding your interaction with the cloud provider, and knowing that you're giving up your rights to capabilities. Now, capability is directly connected to the physical, right? Your capability is the physical aspect of being able to accomplish or achieve something. So the cloud provider provides capabilities, and they can also provide the ability to do certain things, but at the very basic level, they have capabilities, and that physical component is hardware resources. So, being able to spin up a VM on, some hypervisor sitting somewhere in, I don't know, Montville, California or something, you're given the privilege or the right to do that. So you should know that when you're doing that, you have to have software that's able to take advantage of these capabilities. So don't spin up a VM that's super huge for something that probably doesn't need a huge VM, right? So these are things that you have to start thinking about. Thinking about resource consumption as well. Thinking about the I would say the ability of your software. Is your software designed well enough to even go into the cloud? Can your software support, the different needs of the cloud as well? Because you're giving up a lot of are you ready to do security by yourself? Should you go to a SaaS provider instead of actually going to a cloud provider? These are things that conversations that need to be had. Even if you're just one person, do the research and just kind of look things up, or confide in trusted technology advisors or peers before you actually make that leap. Even if it's just a free trial and it's free to use. Okay, it's free to use. You spin up your VM, you put your app in there. Even if it's a small dev environment that you're creating, you forget about it because you're like, oh, this is just not going to work out. And then what, right? You've got the VM just kind of like sitting out there. So just thinking through all of these little things before you even dive into even a free trial over at Azure or AWS or GCP or IBM or whatever is definitely the first step. And I know it sounds like really silly, but because it's like common sense tells you that you should kind of assess, just kind of like do a business analysis before you even do it. But a lot of organizations, believe it or not, even the large ones, they have certain users that have like spun up things and they don't even know. And once they actually create just kind of like that abstracted public cloud environment internally, then they have to start wrangling that stuff, and they're like, oh crap, there's like a lot of stuff out here. So just do your organization the favor and think about it first before you go.
A couple of things I want to address with what you said, which is great stuff. And I want to just put some comments from the audience. So so just to let everyone know, last week we had an issue with LinkedIn Live in which it went mute. So this time we put links to our YouTube and Twitch. If you want to switch over, if that happens again, depending on the platform that you're on. I think today we're on Twitch, YouTube, Facebook, and obviously LinkedIn. So InfoBro at YouTube says risk management, also not new, is being now revisited with new vigor. Another comment is the cloud is merely a data center outfit. Totally agree with that. I think Steve and Marcel's reaction, I think we both agree with that. Last comment, also don't forget to think about contingency and continuity planning. Yep, cloud service providers can also have disasters like any data center. So
yeah,
let's get into all of that. So a few things that you said, right? The first thing, you mentioned security. So with any cloud provider, it's a shared security model. And I think sometimes people forget that. So it's certain things that they're responsible for, certain things that you're responsible for. Many of the things you're responsible for have to do with your data access and your actual applications. But no one's going to run into, an army running into their data center. They'll handle that for you. Now, getting into what you said about moving in there, the concept MVP, minimum viable product, I like that concept a lot. So how can you take something small and test it in the cloud environment? I think that's some of the benefits that gives you, which you can spin something up, test it on a small frame, whether you're an enterprise and you're migrating, or you're even a new fintech and this is cloud native to you. Getting that small thing to work and test it before expanding. A couple of other things that you said regarding elasticity. So you start with the minimum amount of resources. You can always scale up. And InfoBro's point now is disaster recovery and business continuity. I mean that's definitely I totally agree. I've seen organizations that have actually not just hybrid from on-prem to cloud, but actually hybrid cloud environments for that purpose. So that's it. So Marcel, back to you. I just want to kind of add into some of the things.
And I want to be respectful of time as well. I know we were like going to go over. We talked about this yesterday. It's just bound to happen.
But it's so many things to cover with that.
Yeah, and, now I'm thinking about it. I'm like 7. That's I should have just said 2 things you need to go into the cloud.
So it's all good. Let's definitely just get that full.
I'm gonna do my best to kind of like condense a lot of the, so obviously business continuity, contingency planning, all of that fun stuff. I guess that can kind of segue into one of the other points, which is look at the different cloud providers, compare and contrast, make sure that you understand, what each one of them is offering. Some of the things, or the, not all cloud providers, they're not all the same, right? Everyone, kind of has their own thing, right? Amazon, they kind of led the game. They really, and like I said, cloud was something that existed for such a long time. This pay to play, which also existed, right? If you're business function and you want to, spin something up in a data center, you really have to look at the budget. You have to look at the cost of the resource and all that fun stuff in it. And you have your cost centers that kind of deal with that. But this is pay to play for revenue, which is, kind of like a new concept. So, a company like Amazon spinning that up, starting that up, great, phenomenal. They did that, and they focused mainly on, kind of like the Nix operating systems, and just kind of like that. I don't want to say open source and freeware, but like realistically, a lot of the Nix systems are open source. So unless you decide to get that enterprise level, but they just opened up the chasm for, small organizations, emerging organizations to, maybe pay for the use of resources within their data center, but not have to worry about OS licenses at the same time, right? So that's a really great thing. So a company like Amazon starting that up, I think, closely, who followed right after, I think Microsoft followed immediately after, and they were, pretty proactive in making sure that they can kind of do the same thing, but on the Windows side. So, Amazon, great for emerging tech, like, startups. It's great for large organizations too. Don't get me wrong on that. I just think that the entry point, if you are a smaller organization or startup, Amazon just has a lot of great stuff that you can kind of look into, and you don't have to worry about, massive OS licenses for all these VMs that you'll be spinning up. And that makes it, very accessible and reliable, and it obviously just pushes tech forward. Then you have, Microsoft that comes in and they do the hybrid, just kind of like on-prem. We've been using Windows forever. I was introduced to a computer at a very young age, and it was a Windows computer. So, knowing that and understanding that helps with, doing the compare and contrast, especially if you're looking into, making sure that you have business continuity and comparing different cloud providers and making sure that all of that is in line. So if you're a smaller company or a small fintech or a startup, so on and so forth, and you are looking into getting into the cloud, Microsoft might not have that many offerings for you. They do have Nix environments and all that fun stuff, but that's Amazon's thing. So you might want to look into Amazon, right? So I'm just kind of like going through the process that you might take in order to choose one over the other. Then you have GCP, and their focus, we discussed this as well. Their focus is big data, just kind of like, like a big, data sets and just kind of like pouring over those data sets and getting intelligence from, like, they do that really well. They do it really quickly. So if that's your thing, kind of like the IoTs and you have a lot of endpoints that are shooting data back into, the cloud, or there's a service that's pulling that data, you may want to look into GCP. If you are the head of a unit within a large organization that is doing all of the above, then you can kind of look at different ways that you can be creative in, just creating fallback mechanisms. So if this happens over here at Microsoft, can we quickly put it over here in Amazon? Those are different ways that you can start looking at the cloud providers. But, I think for smaller organizations, it's okay to just kind of be on that single cloud, provider. It's perfectly fine. It doesn't mean that you're not doing something right. But for larger organizations, for business continuity and definitely making sure that you don't have all your eggs in one basket, you should definitely look at the different cloud providers and different ways that you can, kind of segment that stuff out. And then, it's really interesting because a lot of them have, express routes that are available. So you can kind of like be creative in the way that you have direct links into the cloud providers and how they feed back into on-prem services and what you can do on-prem with them, or if you need to send them back out, if you need to scale, if you need to minimize, like there are unique ways that you can do that if you're a larger enterprise. But smaller, I think, just kind of looking at each one of them and then looking at what you need service-wise and resource-wise. Those are some of the highlights for each one of the vendors that are out there, the larger ones. IBM, I think IBM, we can really look at IBM, I guess, as a fourth contender, and that would probably be more of their, kind of like their Watson, and I think they were really good with quantum computing, which is a whole other beast. Quantum computing is like a different topic, but really popular with Watson and being able to use that. And then, after Watson, we started to hear about Alexa. So obviously it created a footprint. So just really know what you're going after and don't just pick one just to pick one because it may not be suitable for your needs.
I actually talked to a fintech like a month ago, and they're using Hyperledger in their consortium in terms of their platform around mortgage lending, and they're also on the IBM cloud, and they're leveraging their AI with Watson. So it's interesting that you said that. It's a question from the audience. How do you see training intersecting with success in implementing business infrastructure in the cloud?
I need to read that again. So can we get this person on so that they can actually ask us this question?
No.
I don't understand. I don't think I understand it well enough to be able to answer it. And
I'm gonna just go with it. I think in terms of training, I would assume he's talking about the expertise in your organization in terms of understanding which cloud provider and looking at it and how to basically implement and migrate.
Yeah. How can you train to be successful? Implementing.
Well, one of the things that I've seen organizations do is they might bring in an expert, but then internally their staff is getting updated on certifications and basically getting that knowledge in house. I think one organization that comes to mind that did it extremely well is Capital One. More on the financial side, a lot of their people really up their knowledge in AWS and cloud providing. As a cloud provider, and they just raise their expertise. And I think that's like a recommendation. There's a book called In the Cloud, actually written by, I think, some Amazon folks, AWS folks. And that was one of the things that they mentioned was, getting your staff up to speed. It's everyone's basically growing together in your migration journey. But, you obviously will bring in some experts, but then have the internal staff getting updated. So I think that's what InfoBro was saying.
Yeah, and I think that's a great approach to get the experts in and to have them talk through that. Your staff also has to be willing to accept maybe the advice given by the experts as well, because I've seen pushback within organizations. It's like, this is how they do certain things. And, the expert comes in and they're having a conversation and there's either a lot of pushback or the expert comes in and they don't have the information that they need in order to give good advice because they're still, not necessarily a part of the organization, right? Or the relationship is going to be short-lived anyway because they're there and they have an objective, and that's to, help you bring their staff up to speed. So there are, soft points in there that I think, are really important as well in order to successfully, have the people portion of that people, operational technology, all that fun stuff. The people portion of it, sometimes it's ignored, and I just don't get it. Like,
Yeah,
you can't ignore the people component. We're not fully we're not technically autonomous yet. We just started, grazing the surface with RPA. That's just like a little, like, this is just kind of like, what do you call it? The bunny slopes at the ski resort. That's what RPA is.
And Marcel's talking about RPA, robotic process automation.
I don't think everyone knows what RPA is now, because I think there was one day I was, I don't know, I think I was driving or something, and there was a billboard that said, good thing I'm retiring because the robots are taking all the jobs anyway, and I would have been out of a job soon. So it's just like one of those things where, everyone knows that but RPA, nothing to be, we are a long ways away from being fully autonomous. And can you really be fully autonomous, right? Because you still need a point of provenance, and that's a human, or that's like someone actually telling the machine what to do.
So
anyway, that's besides the point. The point is getting to the people. Training is really, if you start focusing on the people and focusing on giving, if there's an expert in-house or an expert that's coming from a consulting organization, giving them the tools and not being afraid that they're going to use those tools somewhere else or against you, or whatever the case is extremely important to be successful at training your people to do the work that you want them to do. So
last comment, and we're going to start wrapping things up. It's a problem of, I can't touch it, so I can't trust it, just like you highlighted, Marcel.
Yeah, so if you feel like you can't trust it because you can't touch it, then don't try to touch it. Don't use it. Like, I don't know, like, it's kind of like one of those things, right? If it's kind of like being in a bad relationship or something, right? It's like, why do you stay? You should just go. Like, just get out of the relationship. If you have a solution that's working for you right now, and it's a trustworthy solution, and it makes you feel comfortable, and it keeps your clients happy, then and continue to use it. If you're considering the cloud, but you don't trust the cloud, then maybe the cloud's not for you, right? Maybe you need to find another way around it. If you can't trust the cloud, but you don't have any real solid reasons, right? Besides, I can't physically touch the resource. You technically you can't. You can go to Microsoft's data centers. You can actually do an audit there, but like, if you're not willing to do that, and that's not your objective, then you probably shouldn't be considering the cloud.
We could spend like literally an hour talking about that, because I'm going to save my opinions on that whole concept. But that's a whole nother rabbit hole. But let me ask you a question. But seriously, thank you for stopping in today. Really appreciate it.
No problem. And I'm sorry. Like, I think we got a lot of stuff from our friend over Infobro. So I really hope that we were able to answer his questions.
No, Infobro, he came last week.
It was good.
Yeah, Infobro's cool. He's been coming every week, so I appreciate him. So Marcel, how do people get in contact with you if they want to contact you?
LinkedIn is a good place to start.
Excellent.
I may not be the best with answering messages as soon as they come, but I'll definitely get around to it. I just obviously just pretty open about that, but LinkedIn is definitely the first step to getting in contact with me, and if there's anything that we can do further, then we'll kind of consider.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for stopping through. And to all the viewers, thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Tech Behind FinTech. We definitely
before you go, one of the biggest pieces of us having this conversation is because of just kind of like the cloud research stuff that I did a while back. If you're really gonna dive in, and this is to the audience, if you're really gonna dive in and look at resource consumption, services, and all that. And maybe in the future, you and I will have a conversation about that. If you're really going to dive into that, one thing you should just kind of like theory or a body of work that you should look into is something called Little's theorem. I did a lot of research on it. I picked out some data points. I played around with it. It's if you're into that type of stuff, that's a great way to go. If you have data that you can play with historically, that's not like just really complex and intricately connected where it creates like crazy lattice webs and stuff, i.e. like the weather system that can't be predicted. But if you can go back and you can get data and you can kind of like see some kind of predictability there, it's really good to be able to, use something like Little's theorem to predict resource consumption. That's like a thing that can be done. You can either get software or you can pull your own data, predict resource consumption, and it will guide you into the right.
I'm going to say this now because first. Chantel said, very insightful. Thank you both. Thank you for tuning in. Really appreciate. So what I predict in the future is an actual episode just on Little Theorem and how you're applying it. And I'm going to say this, and when we do it, though, we need an actual slide. Like, we need a pictures because that's something that it has to be something visual. You said what?
Hardcore. We're going to skip the pictures. We're going to go straight into like digging into the data. And then, I like a quick demo, maybe not that quick, but I can play around with data and show people how to figure out how to do the resource consumption piece of it. Like
I want to actually. So I think we should do that. Like when I say picture, but something that people can visually see and we can demo. That would be like excellent.
When you say slide and pictures, I'm thinking of like a presentation with like huge. Pictures.
We're gonna have something visual going on. I think that'll be an awesome show topic. So let's plan for that in the future. Let's talk about that offline. Once again, so thank you very much, and you have a wonderful weekend. To the audience who tuned in, thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Tech Behind FinTech. You can catch us every Friday at 12 p.m. EST. We're streaming now on LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, and we'll probably stream to more places in the future. To all have a wonderful day. Marcel, hang around. I'll talk to you offline. Hang on, let me take us off and I'll talk to you offline. Okay. 1 second.